I'm Claire Edwards, and you're listening to Authentic Leadership, a series of conversations, insights and inspirations with leaders who are real, raw and authentic. Today I bring you a conversation with Emma Weber, CEO of Lever Transfer of Learning, an organisation dedicated to bridging the gap between learning and business results. My conversation with Emma in this podcast focuses on leading virtually, something she's done from inception, and it's jam-packed with tips, tools and tales from the trenches. So whether you're an emerging leader or a well-established leader and new to leading virtually, this is the podcast for you. Enjoy. When I moved to Sydney, I was introduced to Emma Weber, and I have to admit to being a tad jealous about her work. You see, Emma was executing what I'd been trying to do for years and without too much luck. Emma Weber is the CEO of Lever Transfer of Learning and believes passionately, as I do, that learning transfer is the missing link in professional development. We're all too aware of the cost of investment in training, which then escalates if that learning isn't fully applied and implemented back in the workplace. But it's not so much the concept of transfer of learning that I want to chat to Emma about today. That's going to have to wait for another podcast. It's the fact that from the get-go, Emma has led her organisation and her team virtually, which is extremely relevant for the situation that many leaders are finding themselves in today. Emma, welcome to Authentic Leadership.
Thank you, Claire. So thrilled to be here today chatting with you.
Yeah, it's going to be a really, really enjoyable and enlightening conversation, I believe. So before we actually do a deep dive into leading virtually, I'd love for our listeners to hear a little bit about your career journey and what led you to Lever Transfer of Learning being conceived and born.
Well, it's a bit odd, Claire, because my professional qualification, my degree is in textile design. So when you go from textile design to learning, it is a bit of a journey. But my sort of first career was in retail buying and merchandising, working in the UK and the Middle East for people like Next and Debenhams. If there's some UK listeners, they'll recognise those brands. Mm-hmm. But I was trained to coach as a manager. So I went on a 2-day coach training course at an organisation in London and just absolutely loved it. And I'd always wanted to work for myself, and I was really close to starting a business in the UK. And at the very last minute, I lost my nerve and I went into management consulting, which I did for a couple of years. But I was consulting, I was on a consulting project, but I was really coaching people. And the client said, Emma, you're providing more value than many other management consultants we've had. And I knew in my heart of hearts, it was because I was using a coaching-based approach. So I used that moment to pivot, decided to move to Australia to start an organisation in coaching, which then morphed into using coaching for learning transfer. So that's really the journey. And that was 18 years ago that I moved to Australia to start my own business. I thought I'd go somewhere where no one would offer me a job so that I wasn't tempted back into the corporate world. So, and 18 years later, I'm still here.
So you took the temptation away. You thought, right, let's make it so that I have to do it. And really, that's really interesting. So what was some of the, apart from obviously the coaching element, what were some of the triggers or the signals that facilitated that morphing, that when you realized that we're missing a huge link here?
I think in some ways the missing link is so obvious, it can be hard to see it because we almost just accept it. But I was reading a research report about, coaching when it was added onto training. I was also just, browsing the web as you do and saw a company in Canada that was doing something similar. And so I spoke to one of my corporate clients about it in Australia, and they really liked the idea. And within about 4 months, that was all our business was focusing on, was transfer of learning.
Wow.
And really it's just grown through there. And, shout out to James Harper from BMW Australia. He really got it. And he knew it was the missing gap. And when I said, well, this is what we can do, this is how we can help you, he just ran with it. And, we were working with BMW then for 15 years.
I'm so tempted to go down the transfer of learning rabbit hole, which we're not going to do, because I do want to be that for another podcast, because we, in terms of return on investment, and it's just an absolute no-brainer. But I am going to park it. I am tempted, but I'm going to park it.
Yes, I'm with you.
So we're talking about, was it 2002 that you set up? And this is what I find really interesting. So 2002, look, that's what, 18 years.
Yep.
So 18 years ago, you made a conscious decision to set up your organization virtually, which I don't think in 2002, certainly wasn't the norm, but I think it was definitely in the minority. So I'd love to hear more about, what was going on for you? What influenced you making that decision?
I think to maybe say it was a conscious decision, I'm not quite sure if it's conscious. I think when you start a business, you end up doing lots of things that you don't know you're not meant to do. And so
I hear you.
So I remember within 6 months of moving to, 6 months, maybe a year of moving to Sydney, I was featured in the Sydney Morning Herald with a half a page, blurb, picture, the whole thing. I didn't know how difficult that was to get, because I was naive, I was new, I was just full of the joys of starting my own business. And now I think, oh my God, how on earth am I going to get half a page in the Sydney Morning Herald? Because I know that it's difficult. And I think it's a little bit like starting virtually. So when I moved here, I started with an office in London and an office in Sydney. Mm-hmm. And the office in London was literally a postal address. And you can get postal addresses in other countries, and you can, in my heart of hearts, I felt we were already an international business. And to do that, we needed to be virtual. And as I mentioned BMW earlier, and one of the facilitators I met at BMW, I'd been working with him, I think, for, a good 12 years before he realized that I wasn't just the offshoot of a much bigger business that was based in London.
Fake it till you make it.
And I had no idea I was faking it, because I didn't know who assumed that. And so really, through having those two offices, and now, representation in the US as well, that actually just set the intention from the very, very early days. We're not just focusing on one country, we're being virtual, and we're having people in different countries. I think the conscious decision then to have my admin support and operations for my business virtual was kind of a slightly different decision further down the line.
Okay.
But in the very early days, that's what drove it, Claire.
So how did you find your coaches and for your business? How, and it being such early days, I suppose for them it was an interesting opportunity as well.
Yeah. And I think people love to be involved in an international organization, and where they get to meet people from other countries. We have now people on our team who, if they go on holiday, to France, they will connect with our French coach if they're from, America or wherever, because we have, built those relationships. So I think people love that kind of aspect of being able to connect with other people and not just staying within your own circles.
Yeah.
In terms of how I found people, a lot of the time it was through referrals from within our own network of people that know people, or people that have coaches that have trained with other coaches that they respect. Also, in some countries, we reached out via LinkedIn to people. One of the key things for us is a really robust interviewing process and recruitment process, but it's all done virtually. And in fact, I've got people on my team who have been on my team for 5 plus, maybe even 8 years. Time just passes me by, Claire. I couldn't exactly say, but that I have never ever met.
Wow.
But I feel as if I know them so well. And so in our minds, even though we have never met, it doesn't mean we're not a close connected team. Now, I have met some of my team if I travel to a country, we will have a get together in a region. But yeah, it's funny. It kind of doesn't become an issue for us that we have met or that we're working virtually.
I really want to drill down on that, Emma, because some of the feedback that we're hearing and that I'm hearing from team members in companies that I liaise or work with is that when we first went into lockdown, there was, a huge amount of communication and people still really felt part of the tribe. And then as the months have gone by, that communication has reduced slightly, say from the manager or the leader, and people are feeling slightly isolated or disconnected. So, you've decided on this from the get-go. What are some of the things, conscious or unconscious, in terms of building those relationships and forming that tribe that could help people who are thinking, well, gosh, now I'm either going to be in an online, a virtual team from now on or a hybrid team. How do I keep and forge those connections? How do I onboard people virtually and still get them to feel a part of the tribe?
Yeah. So I think there's two different questions there, Claire. There's the onboarding and then then how you actually manage the tribe going forward. So I'm going to kick off with how you manage the tribe piece first. I really think the secret to it is have absolute regular cadence for your communications, that everyone knows when the communication is happening and what it's for around a regular cadence. Now, obviously, there's other communications that may happen. I've been WhatsApping with my different members of my international team over the last couple of days, but we have a regular cadence of weekly toolbox for our ops team. So my ops team is in the Philippines, and we meet on a daily basis every day for 15 minutes. We then have weekly one-on-ones. And I think what's really interesting is a lot of leaders that I speak to, when they used to work in an office, they perhaps didn't formalize those weekly one-on-ones because they were, inverted commas, seeing their people all the time.
Yeah.
I actually think there is something about a weekly one-on-one, and we have weekly one-on-ones and then quarterly, we call them progress reviews, quarterly reviews, but that is just focusing on the person. When I go into my weekly one-on-one, which is typically about tasks and things we're managing, always before we get to that task list, I genuinely check in with that person.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, check in, how's the family? Like one of my team has just started doing homeschooling. What's happening with the homeschooling? So it's person before process. Our quarterly review is the time where we only talk about the person and their development and how they've gone. So we really have a standard time every 3 months that has to happen. But on a weekly basis, we are checking in. Now, this is for my ops team. For my contract team that might not be with the organization, constantly. It all depends on what projects we have in which countries, as to how much work people are doing. We have a monthly team meeting. I send a video out before that meeting so that meeting doesn't become me updating everyone with what's going on. So there's a short video that goes out beforehand, and quite often my ops team join that video, and everyone, we have a marketing update, we have the finance update, I give my update. So the video takes care of the update piece. So we make sure when we're on that call, it's really valuable. And then we have a set agenda on that call that we will work through. But the purpose for that call is building community, and everyone knows that.
Yeah.
And so because we run that call twice on the same day. So I say on the same day in Australia. So we will run it late in the evening and early in the morning. So if you're in America, you'll join the morning call. If you're in Europe, you'll join the late call. We always put the recordings of the call on the company intranet, so if people missed it, they can listen to the recording. But I think the consistency of the way that we do the agenda, and part of our agenda are, we have a question of the month, and we open the call with everyone just saying 2 or 3 minutes, or even just a minute, of what has happened for them that month. And the question, and then you answer the question of the month. So this month, the question of the month is, what's your favorite flower? and they're just random questions. Rubes on my team comes up with them. I'm surprised when I see the question as well. But it's just a really nice way, because even though, you know, some people, we've been together 5, 8 years, longer, through those type of questions, you just find out about people.
Absolutely. And sorry, I do want, let's park the onboarding for a second, because there's something really important that you've put there. It's showing that you care, but also I think, you know, we are in unprecedented times of uncertainty, and, you know, from my perspective and knowledge of neuroscience, our brains crave consistency. They crave predictability. That's what gives us a sense of security. And when we feel secure, and when we feel, you know, our sense of importance is enhanced, then we can be productive and engaged. So I think it's so important what you're saying about the consistency, that people know what to expect, that they know that they're being listened to, that they know that someone cares about them other than their work-based performance.
And I think, Claire, the interesting thing as leaders is finding ways. Like, I do genuinely care about my people without a shadow of a doubt. But what I had to do is I had to find ways to kind of almost program in that care on a weekly basis. So that when I'm stressed and busy, the care doesn't suddenly go out the window. And absolutely, that wouldn't be my intention. But I needed to make sure that I had certain things anchored in that we always do. So, for example, on the ops team meeting, we have a weekly ops team meeting. So we have the one-on-ones, but then we have a weekly meeting with us all together. And again, this has always been virtual. And the first thing we do is we do a pulse check. And in a pulse check, you answer 4 questions. Scale of 1 to 5, how am I feeling? Scale of 1 to 5, how much value do I feel I have given to the clients this week? Scale of 1 to 5, how happy am I with my learning? Because learning is really important to everyone in our organization. And we don't use 1 to 5, we use A, B, C on this, which is just us designing it how we want it. How's your workload at the moment? And a C is, I'm just getting confused with my own scales here. I don't know why we aren't using a scale of 1 to 5. But basically, basically, if you're on an A or an A+, you're feeling slightly overwhelmed. And then we look at how can we division the workload up? What can we do to support you? What do you need? If you're on a C, you can potentially take on more work from other people. If you're on a B/B+, you're probably about right. Yeah. And so we have that conversation every week. And I actually got that. Let's just accredit this. I was reading a book. I can tell you exactly now. It was on my 40th birthday weekend away in Byron, called Sleeping with Your Smartphone, because I was worried about burning out. You know, you have those milestone birthdays and you really sit down and reflect. And it was in there.
You read a business book.
Yeah, exactly. And it was written by a consultant who used to work at Bain & Co. And they, I think, were using that tool throughout Bain, or whether it was just throughout certain teams, to help people balance work-life balance. Yeah. And I really identified, yes, I had a challenge with it, but I wanted to make sure that my team didn't have a challenge with it. And we've been doing the pulse check ever since on that.
And what I'm thinking about listening to you saying about the pulse check, in order to be able to authentically do that pulse check, you need to have built trust and psychological safety, because for people to be able to say how they're feeling, honestly how they're feeling, and honestly what value they've given to their clients, they have to trust you, they have to trust each other.
Yeah.
So what did you do going about building that culture of trust and psychological safety?
Well, so one of the things I say about safety is you need to take it from unspoken to spoken. And like,
Yeah.
it's almost, safety is one of those things that people just assume, but I don't think you can assume it. You have to actively work at it. I think the whole thing is being able to say truly how I am feeling. So I lead by example.
Yeah.
You know, we are in general a very happy, positive team, but sometimes everyone has days where we're not 100%, and we just kind of name that and share it. I think it's funny because I have a contract team, and they contract to other organizations, and people say to me, no one does it like we do it at Lever. And I kind of go, why not? And then I go, I don't worry about what anyone else does, but I want people to enjoy what they do. I want people to love when they come into the Lever community every day and come to work at Lever. Well, they're in their own home working at their own desk, but they have the mindset that they're coming into the Lever community for that. And therefore you have to have the community even stronger virtually. But Claire, I think it's only at the beginning of COVID that I really started to sit down and unpack and go, well, how have we done this?
Yeah.
Because this would be helpful to share with other people. Because we just did it, with parked learning transfer. I fully respect that. But that's our business, that's our passion, that's our life. Mm-hmm. Building this culture has just been sort of accidental. But potentially it's the most powerful thing about our business.
Yeah. And that's why people stay with you.
Yeah. And we don't always get it right, Claire. There's learnings, and there's one of my team members, I was messaging him last night, and I realized I sent on a WhatsApp, his mother was in hospital and had just come through a very, very difficult night in the worst of scenarios. And I used the phrase, well done. And I read that back and I thought, Emma, what on earth are you saying well done for? Now, the funny thing is, this lovely colleague's mother is such a trooper. Like, she is such a trooper. And that was what was in my mind. But as soon as I read that message back, I immediately sent another message that just said, hope those words didn't misfit. What I meant was, etc.
Yeah.
I don't even know why I'm sharing that example, Claire. Just
well, to what I'm hearing is this: when you're, and we all hate the word pivot, but for those leaders who are pivoting from in the office to virtual or face to face, it's about making the unconscious conscious. Being consciously aware of the mindset of people at the moment who are dealing with so much change and stuff that we don't know about that's happening at home, and thinking about the language that we use, the frequency of our communication and the nature of our communication. So it makes absolute sense to me.
Yeah. Claire, can I just throw one thing in here? I think one of the things, if I were listening to us chatting, I'd be thinking, this all sounds very fluffy. I'm aware of the results. And so one of the things that we've done to build safety, well, a couple of things. So with our team, we're constantly kind of collecting and building the metrics of what performance has happened or not happened, what's happened with every single project. We have done that for years and years and years. And we always look at those numbers and look at where can we learn from them. And part of really had to do work when people come onto the team, it's not always about getting the 10. If we're always getting a 10, we're not learning and we're not growing.
Yeah.
Let's celebrate those wins, but then let's not be afraid to look into those areas where we haven't got the outcome. And what happened? Why was it? What could we do differently? And we do that in a way that's not, it's never a bad thing to be looking at that. And we have a mentoring and development conversation for all of our teams. I now have a senior team that does that. I used to mentor everyone myself up until about 4 or 5 years ago. And they were just some of the most rewarding calls. And I actually think a lot of the time, particularly with our contract team, that's why people stayed with us, because we had such growth. But the reason we had such growth is because we weren't afraid to look at those times when we hadn't got, an amazing 9 or 10 outcome and really delve into it. The other thing that we do on a weekly basis with my ops team, when I talked about that standard agenda that we have, one of the things we have on the agenda is near misses. And we go around the group and everyone shares what near misses they've had that week.
I like that.
Mike Muskins, who used to be on my team, taught us this. And he used to watch, do you know the show Air Crash Investigations?
I know it. I've never seen it, but I know it, yeah.
I used to say to Mike, why would anyone watch Air Crash Investigations when they then have to go and do international travel? Now, I cannot think of anything worse. But what Mike told me that he had learned from Air Crash Investigations is that when a plane actually goes down, it's never just one thing that goes wrong. It's always a combination of small little things that go wrong, and they perhaps either all go wrong together or have happened over a period of time. And so the whole idea for near misses is that we catch the small things that we can perhaps fix ourselves and is no big deal. And, the client is none the wiser, not that we're doing dodgy things for our clients still, but there's a little thing like a time's wrong in an invite or whatever, and we fixed it and no one noticed it and it had no consequence. We unearth those every single week so that we can fix them as we go along and find out the real problem for it and what do we need to do next time so that doesn't happen. And that's just every week we talk about near misses.
I absolutely love that, Emma, because you it's like the opposite end of the continuum to micromanagement, because everybody's just identifying their own small things that collectively could make a big difference, bad or not. So I love that strategy.
So we partner the near misses with the win of the week. And so also on that call, everyone has a chance to share their win of the week, whether it's a personal win or whether it's a professional win.
Yeah.
And so we celebrate, and we also look at, shouldn't have done that. What can we do differently, etc. So Claire, sorry, beg your pardon. I get excited about this stuff.
I know. I can hear the passion in your voice, and I love it. I mean, it's just somebody new to leading a virtual team will get so much benefit out of this, and I think it's probably an appropriate time now to go back to that onboarding, because probably never before or rarely, unless you've taken the strategy that you've taken, people are interviewing, recruiting and onboarding virtually from the get-go. So there's a couple of things going on in my mind around here. Is firstly, making sure that you've got the best fit of a candidate when you can't actually see them face to face, and secondly is that creating and managing that process so that they are fully onboarded and part of the tribe. So I'd love to hear more about that, Emma.
I think it's funny because when I'm bringing my members of my team on board in the Philippines, it's funny, Claire, just if you can't see someone face to face, you just do the induction virtually and you don't think it's any big deal. And so I think the thing is, you make time, you chat and you listen. You have we have some calls where we have videos on, some where we have videos off, and we just have a routine around that. We have a really powerful and welcoming induction collateral or sort of manual that people can, read through. I'm quite proud of that. It says the history of Lever. It's got about our culture. It's got about our values. But really, it's being purposeful about it's just exactly the same as ways you would onboard someone into a regular organization. So I kind of think we think it needs to be done differently because it's virtual, and it probably does, but it just needs to be done the same, but in a virtual way. So that's not true, because it's not about having, sat in someone meeting after meeting for hour after hour. But, it's about engaging. It's about giving people things that will help them think, help them understand, being there to support them.
And it's probably more effective in, when I remember sort of all the jobs I've had with onboarding in an office environment. Dear God, I've been so inundated with information and meeting people that at the end of every day, I was exhausted and ready to collapse by the end of the week. So it's probably spaced out better when it's done virtually as well.
Yeah, and you just plan for it. And when I've brought people on in the Philippines, sometimes it's been a year before we've met, and yet they've been working full time, and we've been working together every single day.
Yeah.
And what I try and do now is, on alternate years, me go to the Philippines and the Philippines team come here. Now, obviously, that's on pause at the moment with COVID. And we've openly said, look, it may be a while until I get back to the Philippines or the team have their next trip here. I remember when one of my team members from the Philippines came here, they hadn't even had a passport before. It was the first time that they had left their family. But, that was wonderful to bring them here. And I love that we did that. It didn't feel absolutely necessary that we must do that. We just wanted to.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm going to change tack slightly because I remember when I first heard about this, you introduced it at an AITD conference, because it's not just the running of Lever that's virtual. I think it was back in 2016 that you piloted your artificial intelligence coach bot, Coach M. And I just for me to try and get my head around an artificial intelligent coach, I don't get it. And now I'm one of your greatest advocates. But tell us more about Coach M.
Well, the funny thing with Coach M is it took me a while to get my head around it as well, Claire. Let's be honest. And I was joking with a client the other day. We were doing a presentation together, and they were reminding me of how resistant I was in the beginning. To say, I have an amazing team of people around the world who are talking with people over the phone, having learning transfer conversations. I'm always saying to them, remember, it's not about you and the participant or the learner having a conversation. It's about you helping the learner have a conversation with themselves.
Yeah.
For me, thoughts, feelings, values, beliefs, and fears control our behaviors. I know you're hugely into the neuroscience, and we could geek off in a little avenue on that. But in essence, it's all about what happens inside that brain that controls the behaviors. So we need to get the person connecting with themselves. And so anyway, one of the team said to me one day, well, Em, if that really is true, why can't it be done with artificial intelligence? And we just, do away with ourselves. And I sort of said, no, never, not in my lifetime. The AI will never be able to do that. And as a leader, you've gone into that space of being defensive. And you kind of go, oh, hang on a second. Let's just be a little bit more open-minded. Could it be possible? Would it be possible? And basically, we just started to experiment. We have an amazing technology partner across in the US. And over the last 3 or 4 years, we have refined and updated the conversations that Coach M has with participants. And so for some clients, they just work with Coach M. Other clients, they have some conversations with one of my team members, some conversations with Coach M, and other clients just work with the team member. So we've now got a really fully augmented offering of learning transfer and coaching delivered by AI and by a human team virtually. But essentially, it's all by either SMS text message or Microsoft Teams chat. Fully virtual. The person can have the conversation anywhere they want, anytime they want. It's quite mind-blowing.
And so when you get a new client on board, how do you, or is it the client who presents the fact that their new coach is going to be a bot?
Well, we believe you have to be absolutely transparent with that. 110% transparent. And a lot of the times when we're in organizations, it's really big projects that are scaling, and people often wouldn't be able to have human coaching because of the cost of putting it across so many people. And one of the things that's clear in my mind, this is not saying that talking to the bot is like talking to a human. But actually, what's quite funny is we do get the feedback that people feel it's like talking to a human. So it's kind of in my mind, you need to set the expectation. This is not about sitting down and having a conversation with a human, but people relate to it that way. People will wish the bot happy Christmas. People will say, thanks so much for your help today. You relate to it in that kind of way because of the way we've structured it. And if we think about it as an organization, we had 20,000 one-on-one conversations in the space of learning transfer. We know those conversations like the proverbial back of a hand. Yeah. And that's how we've managed to create the chatbot.
Wow. I know. I mean, I really want to go down the rabbit hole and say, how the heck do you program something like that? But we'll leave that for another conversation as well. And I remember when you were presenting at the conference, might be 2 years ago now, 18 months ago, I had this huge aha moment that Coach M doesn't tell other people. Coach M is completely, totally, and utterly confidential. So you have that trust.
Yeah, you absolutely have. Well, the psychological safety, Claire. I mean, it's psychological safety. And what's interesting is there's studies that have been done in the space of mental health in the US, and veterans that have suffered from PTSD get better results through working with a chatbot, especially in the early stages of their intervention, than they do working with a therapist.
Of course.
Because of the high level of psychological safety. And we've had participants who've said, you know what, I shared more with Coach M, the chatbot, than I would have done if I was talking to a person. The first person that said that, I could not believe it. But it's not only been one person now. People will say that. I'm just like, that is bizarre.
So thinking about this, the more successful Coach M becomes, and I don't know if Coach M has a gender, doesn't it?
Well, broadly, but it's Coach M with the letter M, and we just say to people, that M can stand for whatever you like. Okay. Now, we do have some little videos that go out with a Coach M avatar. The team thought it would be hilarious if the avatar looked like me.
And
I thought that was funny in the early days, and now I'm not so sure. But I don't mind. It's gender neutral unless you want to put a person to it. So we're open, very open.
Okay. So where my thinking is going is, the more successful Coach M becomes, is there a risk of cannibalizing your real team, or is there sufficient need for a hybrid and human solution that won't be a problem?
I think in the early days, I certainly worried about that. And I was really, I communicated that with the team. We've been really open through the whole journey. As to what we're working on, what it looks like. The team have all used it. And where we've kind of come to is, what I realize is really, if people are going to invest in human follow-up, they'll invest in human follow-up.
Yeah.
If they are struggling with budget or weren't going to invest, then they may go to the technology.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I get that.
So I just think we have to know that automation, AI is coming, and it's really about how do we augment and having the best of both worlds, and some conversations with the AI and some with human. I think that is sensational.
Yeah. And in terms of the clients who are adopting this, I mean, what would come to mind firsthand for me is that they're early adopters, they're tech companies. What's the reality?
It's just not that case. So we've had some not-for-profits coming to work with us. We've had pharma, finance sector, some tech companies, but it's much broader than that. And in fact, it hasn't even really started with tech companies. I think the tech companies are getting more interested now. They're seeing what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's interesting. And so thinking about, I mean, this has been jam packed with strategies and sharing your stories. Not wanting to put you on the spot, Em, but are there any? I mean, any stuff ups? I mean, have there been any challenges along the way where you'd say to people listening to this, look, be mindful of this, you know, because it all sounds so wonderfully successful. There must have been some stuff ups.
Oh, there's been heaps of stuff ups, Claire. Heaps of stuff ups. I'm trying to think where do I start? There's a stuff up that is just, it's still really close to home, Claire, because it was a real shock to me that we could get something so wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm happy to share it, and we're still really working through the learnings here.
Mm-hmm.
But it's about the Black Lives Matter and some of the diversity challenges that are happening at the moment in the world. And I think it's an incredible, it's a kind of a difficult journey to be walking because of the way that we are as a society. And I think inherently then what that means is that as individuals, we can say, well, that's kind of a society problem, not necessarily my problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, we have an amazing team of people around the world, exceptionally caring, exceptionally talented. And, you know, I could easily hand on heart say, you know, we do not have racism within our organization, just through the people that we have and the way that we show up. Now, what was really interesting is that as the George Floyd challenges unfolded earlier on this year, I think as an organization, we didn't know how to handle it. Mm-hmm. And we have, you know, a mixed racial team. But I actually think, sitting from my, you know, personal position of white privilege, I don't think I had ever really acknowledged the racial diversity on our team, because I think I was just naive to it, absolutely naive to it. And so we inadvertently, and obviously it was inadvertently because you'd never do this intentionally, one of our team members felt really excluded from Lever because we didn't reach out to them personally at that time to check in how they were. So as a team, you know, I was sharing about the team member whose mother's gone into hospital recently. You know, we check in with things that are happening in someone's country or someone's kind of personal life, whether that's birthdays or, you know, children's milestone birthdays, those kind of things. And I was so concerned about what we needed to do for Black Lives Matter as a business, you know, when organizations were kind of making those statements. And I didn't want to just be one making a statement. I wanted to do something constructive. Plus, you know, you've got all your other business things, you know, going on, which is your distraction. What I missed was just reaching out on a personal level to the people of color within our organization saying, how are you? And in my naivety, I kind of know these are wonderful, wonderful people. And I'm thinking, well, they are not affected by racism because they're such wonderful people. And now we have been doing a lot of reading. We've got a working party around Black Lives Matter. We're having, you know, lots of personal insights and business insights. It's not about the big society issue. It was about just reaching out to individuals. So we made a huge, you know, mortified, huge stuff up that really, you know, affected one of our team in a really poor way. And, you know, I will take that lesson with me forever now. But we're learning from it. You know, I'm doing huge personal learning, and we've got the working party in place, and we're, you know, looking at what changes are we putting. We're putting those into place quite kind of thoughtfully. But yeah, you know, it doesn't take away from being a positive team and a caring team. But yeah, we don't always get it right. So that's probably one of the worst stuff ups, Claire, that I've just chosen to share with you and your listeners. But that's the reality, isn't it? We do things which we get really wrong at times.
Oh, you know, it is. It's a continual learning journey, and And thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that, you're not the only one who's been in that position. And, all my years in corporate, I was so acutely, consciously aware that I was never going to be able to tick the box to say, I am now a great manager, I am now a great leader, because it's just a continual learning journey.
100%.
But what I hear from that, it's the process of uncovering it, acknowledging it, and working on it. That's the most important. And I'm sure your team member now appreciates that.
I think, I think people are with Lever, and I always say this when if you're joining Lever, you're actually on a learning journey, and it's a personal learning journey, and that is for me and every single member of the team.
Yeah.
And in that learning journey, we know what learning's about. You've got to go through some of the really gritty, kind of horrible stuff, realize where you've got it wrong, realize what you didn't know, to then kind of come out the other side with the support of your colleagues. So I think everyone is learning and has learned through the situation.
Wow. I was going to ask another question, but I think the lessons and the learning from what you've just shared is the one for us to finish on, and for people to reflect on and consider their own situation. And
Claire, I just, one thing I want to throw in, it is quite a heavy place to end. So
it's also a positive place to end.
It is a positive place. And what I would say to people is, I think one of the most important things I've learned about it, and that scenario, and learning, having my business, is do not be afraid to stuff up.
Yeah.
And I think I had that written on my wall. It's just come back to me now. In fact, Claire, I'll send you the quote. We can put it in the notes, because I'm not going to remember it now. But about not being afraid to stuff up, and that's the journey. Even whether you're leading a virtual team, a small team, a big team, you're not going to get it 100%. But just go in there and give it a go.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Emma.
Thanks, Claire.
So is it okay? What I'd like to put in the show notes, I just do little sort of bullet points, because I really want people to listen to the full conversation. And so am I good to put your LinkedIn details on there?
That would be lovely. Very happy to connect with people. Thank you.
Obviously, your amazing book, which we'll talk about when we talk about transfer of learning next year in next year's podcast, and the not afraid to stuff up quote. I would love that. It's been enlightening. It's been, educational. I've learned so much. Thank you for your generosity of spirit, for everything that you shared. Go well, and hope to see you soon in face.
Thank you, Claire, and to you. Very best wishes. Thanks for today.
Thanks. Bye-bye now.